Nico.
Hope all is well. I'm Ava Adams.
And I'm Tessa Stevens, and thanks for joining us.
We're here for connecting and supporting people,
sharing relatable moments,
always encouraging and always growing. We're
practically
social work. So excited to be back. We have a guest. We have Justin with us, and we're going to be talking about ADHD and social work. So first, I would like for Justin to introduce himself and give a little bit of info about himself and what he does.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my name is Justin Gillespie. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and therapist in the state of Michigan. My specific niche is ADHD, handling executive functioning matters. I work with clients mostly in Michigan, and I work with a few clients also over in Indiana. I have a private practice of my own, and I also do private practice coaching for people who need help with things like marketing, and I help you get your first 10 clients. Yeah, that's essentially my main thing.
So to jump into ADHD, this is one of my favorite topics. What are some signs of ADHD, and what are some of the biggest challenges that people with ADHD face, like in areas like school, work, relationships, social interactions?
So around 6 to 12, that grade school era of life, you will see a lot of maybe distractedness. Usually what you'll see with boys, you'll see a lot of hyperactivity, impulsivity, things that, whereas girls tend to be inattentive. That does vary though, but that is the typical statistic of that. Whereas as you get older, as far as like teenhood, what you'll often see is you'll see a mix of that, but you'll also see a lot of distancing yourself from your peers, maybe more rejection sensitivity matters, things of that nature. And then as an adult, you will probably see more things like not being able to turn in work assignments and on time, not interacting with your peers as far as like in work meetings. Either you interact with them too much or you just don't interact with them at all. I see a lot of people with ADHD isolating themselves in the workplace. So those are some main things you'll see on like a base level if you weren't looking at it through the clinical lens. So the big thing with ADHD and diagnosing it, if I were to put you through a full biopsychosocial assessment, do a couple screeners with you, the main things that we would need to see is there are 6 criteria that you would need to get marked on. There's like a list of like 12 of them if you look at the DSM with it, right? So you need 6 of them either for inattentive, 6 of them for hyperactivity type, or to get combined presentation, you need 6 of both. And that's if you're a child. If you're an adult, I believe it's 5, if I remember correctly. I always reference my DSM because it gets super confusing when you're like going through the years and stuff like that. So you'll need 5 criteria though if you are an adult. If anyone wants to fact check me on that later, they can, because I always have to reference that. But the big thing we look for is so these would be things like you would see impulsivity, hyperactivity, losing things in life. These are like losing things are like your pencils, your toys, your whatever. Or for work stuff and adult stuff, it would be like your work badge, your ID, your wallet, your purse, what have you, right? I'm always constantly losing my keys. That's like my big one. You may also see things like dazing off or daydreaming and things of that nature. So there's a lot of different symptoms that can help you meet the criteria for ADHD. And then what happens is we make sure you have those 5 or 6 sense of symptoms depending on what age you are. And then at that point, the big thing we need to look for also is not only are these obviously explained by another mental health disorder or a physical health disorder, but also did you have these symptoms by the age of 12, which is the big thing that a lot of people forget about when diagnosing ADHD. Because a lot of people will see that's a big thing I work with actually right now is a lot of adults coming in with ADHD and they have no idea when this started because they can't remember yesterday, let alone 20 years ago. So we have to really go back into their childhood to ultimately diagnose and see like when did these symptoms actually arise. And sometimes that's super easy, but that's the big thing you really need to find out is were these symptoms going on in childhood or did they just flare up over the last 2 or 3 years if you're an adult getting diagnosed for the first time?
I was a late diagnosis person. I think that happens oftentimes. Yeah.
So what are some common myths about ADHD? Do you think that?
I think that some common myths that are actually starting to drift off finally in 2023 is that the biggest one is that it's little boys' disease. So a lot of people think that it's funny that I work with ADHD and I do a lot of work with it with my TikTok and do stuff like that too. But a lot of people think that ADHD looks like me. And I honest to God will say, if you look at the stereotypical what ADHD is, I am what people really imagine when you think of ADHD. I'm a very hyperactive person. I'm male, I'm white. And so a lot of things that we're trying to break down in the ADHD world right now is the stigma of it's not just for white little boys. There's a lot of people of color now coming into their own ADHD diagnosis. There's women coming into their ADHD diagnosis, right? There's so many multi-layers that are getting peeled back right now because of it. And you also don't have to necessarily be hyperactive, because so at one point there was ADD and then there was ADHD. And back then there was still stigma with it, but it was more clear cut as to like the ADD kids were the ones who were just like not paying attention, and the ADHD ones were the ones not paying attention, and they were hyper, right? So it was a little bit easier to see. Now what they've done is they've actually combined the ADD label into the ADHD label, and you have what's called ADD, ADHD, and attentive type. So that's another stereotype we have still, is that it's people who just can't pay attention and are just super hyper. And occasionally we get the impulsivity too, which is part of the territory, but you don't necessarily have to be super impulsive to have ADHD because it is such an umbrella diagnosis nowadays.
So I think you may have answered my kind of question for you. You talked a lot about myths, and it sounded like some of the things that you were explaining were maybe things you wish that people would understand. Is there anything else that you wish that people would understand about ADHD?
Specifically for adults with ADHD, I think that there's a lot of stigma in the workplace specifically. I've actually been told that because I'm so open with my ADHD, that I essentially have used my ADHD as an excuse where I'm trying to self-advocate for myself, where I'm trying to state where my barriers are, where I'm trying to show, like, even with my ADHD strengths, right? Because there's a lot of strengths that come along with ADHD. There's a lot of creativity that comes out of impulsivity. So because I'm so open with my ADHD in the workplace, that often came up in terms of either you're making an excuse or you're providing a reason. And it's really funny too, because with somebody who maybe doesn't have ADHD necessarily, a lot of people who will stay in their workplace, like in social work, for example, even they will say things like, oh, I can't get my notes done because it's a lot and I can't focus, but they won't say they have ADHD. And they'll be like, oh my God, totally relatable. But the second you say you have ADHD, for some reason, you're looked at as you have a problem now. You have a problem that they look like they feel you're, even through mental health agencies, they will look at you like you are a problem sometimes. And so a lot of times they'll try to get you to be quiet about it. They'll try to tell you that are using this as an excuse to try to get you to stop self-advocating for yourself. There's a lot of workplace stigma that goes along with it as well.
That's such a heavy thing, especially for practitioners like working in the mental health field, and then people like essentially saying, oh, you're just like using it as a crutch. It's crazy how much is actually stigmatized within the world of our scope of practice.
It's really interesting. And you know what? I was just having a conversation about this the other day with somebody who they have ADHD and autism, right? So they have both sets of that neurodiverse umbrella, so to speak, right? With autism, what you'll see a lot of the time is you'll see a lot of people give them stigma, but it's more of, I guess you could call it positive reinforce what stigma, right? They find out they have autism, they think you're so cute, and they're not taken seriously as an adult. But then ADHD, it's the opposite thing too, where it's you say that and it's, oh, you're like a nuisance. For ADHD, we are looked at as you're like that problem child that has, a lot of people almost look at it as like ODD, which shouldn't have stigma either. But I often find ADHD and ODD related symptoms are often correlated with one another when it comes to adults with stigma, and even teenagers especially too.
Sorry, can you explain what ODD is?
Yeah, so ODD is oppositional defiant disorder. So that is essentially, to not get into two DSM diagnoses, right? These are the kids that are basically defying authority for the sake of defying authority. Often with these kids, what they found is there's a lot of trauma in the home. There's a lot of family dysfunction as well as maybe a lack of parental consistent discipline that's age appropriate for the child and things of that nature. And to be honest, there's talks of even removing ODD too, because a lot of it really is trauma based, and they are considering maybe either removing it or making it a form of PTSD in a way. I don't know if that's been confirmed yet or not, so I don't want to state that as fact, but that is a little bit of discussion in that area.
I like that you brought that up. As they know, I was a caseworker for a long time with Department of Social Services, and 90% of the time, the kids that I was working with in foster care or in residential had the ODD diagnosis, but realistically, they didn't have supports in place, and they experienced some heavy trauma for children, literally anybody, honestly, not even just being a child.
Oh yeah, very heavy. So I've actually worked for a juvenile detention center at one point. They will tell you that it was not a juvenile detention center. They will say it was a rehabilitation center. It was jail. Like they were in jumpsuits. They shared like a little locked cell with each other in a concrete wall. They went to the bathroom in front of each other. Like it was juvie jail. Like straight up. Okay, I don't care what anyone says. But basically, to get into the center, you had to have a quote mental health diagnosis, right? That center since been shut down, by the way, just so we're clear. I cannot tell you how many people I saw that came through there the 6 months I was there that had ADHD, bipolar, ODD, and conduct disorder because they got into one fight that went wrong that ultimately led them to the justice system. So now you have these 4 or 5 different diagnoses on a child. And then on top of it, they're being medicated for things that they shouldn't be medicated for, which I know is a hot topic in the ADHD realm, let alone the rest of the mental health realm. And I'm what I call also, I'm labeled kind of the black sheep of the ADHD community too, because I take a more medication neutral stance just because one, medication's not in my scope of practice being a social worker, but also I see a lot of people who've benefited from medication, but I also see a lot of people who are hurting because of medication. And in the ADHD sphere, if you say anything bad about medication lately, what I notice is that you look like you're providing stigma in the medication. I think that we have to take a realistic approach of what's happening with youth, especially with medication. I think it's gotten a lot better on the outside, but in the criminal justice system, I notice a lot of these kids are just being overly medicated so that they don't have to be dealt with, but they can still be profited off of.
Well, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother episode, I think.
I was like, you invited the person with ADHD on. We're going to go into 10 topics. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, but yeah,
I would love
definitely.
to go get more into that. But Justin, what were some different treatment options, like just off the top of your dome, you can just throw out for some people that are diagnosed with ADHD?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big things for treatment options when it comes to ADHD, there's medications that would be through your doctor, a psychiatrist. You can also possibly get it through your PCP, which is debatable treatment. But I will say that there are a lot of neurodiverse affirming PCPs out there now. And then there is individual psychotherapy. So the most common form for ADHD for psychotherapy is cognitive behavioral therapy. For my specific style of therapy, I take cognitive behavioral therapy mixed with motivational interviewing and a strength-based perspective to also then take them through an executive functioning approach. So how I do this is essentially once we go through your assessment portions and things of that nature, probably in the second or third session, what I would have us do is I would go through 10 executive functioning skills and explain what each of them mean. So these are things like impulse control, emotional control, attention and focus regulation, planning and prioritization, working memory. There's a bunch of other ones I go over too, but I take you through 10 of them. And basically what I have my clients do is I have them rate them between 1 and 10. And so 10 is I am super good at the skill. I'm on point with it. I do it really well. And then the 1 is I'm absolutely not good at the skill at all. I always tell my clients, unless you have really good justification, I want to hear it. Nobody's a 10 and nobody's a 1, right? So I know, and I've met some people who were very close to being a 1, and I would not consider them a 1 actually, but they were very close when I worked in juvenile probation specifically. I had a child who had very severe ADHD who would jump out of cars, not because they were suicidal, but they just felt the urge to jump out of cars. I found that out taking them to the park one day because I did was a home-based therapist, and it was an interesting day. But anyway, what I would do with their scores at that point is I would basically rate all of these with them, and then I'd see what is their quote unquote executive functioning average, and then I'd see what are their top 3 or 4 strengths and what are their top 2, 3, or 4 areas of improvement. And that's how I would formulate the treatment plan. So I take their areas of improvement, formulate their goals around that if they chose to have that in their plans too and whatnot. And then as far as the strengths go, I would essentially take the strengths that they have. So these are in things that are rated probably like your top scores or like a 7 or 8 or something in that realm. But I would take the top strengths that individual has, and I would basically take these and say, okay, you're really good at these. Let's also start getting really great at these, because what I noticed with the executive functioning skills, it's not like a list of 10 different skills. It's often like a web, right? So if you can improve your emotional control, you can improve your ability to focus and regulate focus, right? If you improve your ability to regulate focus, then you're going to end up improving your ability to plan and prioritize. If you can do that, then you can also improve your ability to actually execute on tasks and finish tasks and things of that nature, right? Let alone go into task initiation. So if you build on the strengths, what I notice is that you're going to also see those other things that need improvement. You're going to see those ultimately increase just naturally.
I love
Yeah.
strength building. It's my favorite.
So how do you think we as social workers or just social workers in general, how do you think that they can support people with ADHD?
I think first and foremost, we need to be more neurodiverse affirming in our field. So basically what this looks like is if you take someone with ADHD, and this applies to people with autism too, by the way, this would basically look like you're not trying to change the person, you're trying to enhance their life, right? So a lot of times what we're doing is we're trying to change ourselves and change our identities and things of that nature, and that's not what we want to do anymore. Thankfully, a lot of therapists are actually doing this naturally. There's a lot of therapists I've met who they didn't specialize with ADHD, but they were very neurodiverse affirming just naturally. They didn't even realize it was even a term really, but it's just something that's within their nature. I think there's ways to enhance being neurodiverse affirming care, but I also think that it's something that's really within you. Either you want to get to know a person as a person or you don't. That's what I truly feel, right? So if you already have that skill within you, you have that ability to grow that skill and enhance that skill a bit more to provide even better care. But I think it's something truly within people.
Sure. On that note, is there like any specific resources that you can think of that are great, or like even tools that are good for people with ADHD or in their families?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first resources I usually give any of my clients, there's a YouTube channel I really love. It's called How to ADHD. It's one of my favorite YouTube channels. They have a ton of videos on there. Her name is Jessica, who hosts it. She's awesome. I believe she's give or take 40 years old. I can't remember. She has a TED Talk too for anybody who wants to check that out. But she is awesome. She works with a lot of different therapists and doctors and researchers of ADHD, and she has ADHD herself. And she has a lot of different tools on there. So my favorite thing that I give clients, especially parents of clients who need to get their kids to do their chores, I usually give them the video that's called ADHD and Gamification, I believe it's called. And basically what this does is it turns your life into a video game. And so essentially you're achieving life points or you're unlocking quote unquote levels based on the chores you're like doing and what have you. And basically it's just turning your life into a game and you make things fun for yourself. So that's like one of the biggest tools I usually give people is that channel. Aside from that, I think that sensory toys and fidget toys, I think they have such a bad stigma just because when they first came out, they were known as the things that everyone was just like spinning around in class and being annoying. And I am very pro fidget toys since they've come out in the last 6 or 7 years. I'm happy to say that there's a bunch of my kids. I've had IEPs and 504 plans that we've actually gotten them either directly or indirectly with our help. They've been able to carry those into classes. And it's done tremendous work for them. I actually have my box right here that I use for my clients as well as I use it for myself. So this one is actually on Amazon for $20. It has a crap ton of stuff in here. It has like bouncy balls. It has this guy who is, I don't know if you can see it or not, but he's like really folded up and he's a spider fidget and he spins.
Nice.
Yeah, so whenever I'm doing, this is my favorite one right here, and I lost it, and I just found it just now, actually, so I'm glad I did this, actually. But this cube right here is really cool because you have a lot of different motions that you'd want to fidget with. This is like an analog stick for a video game. This up
I have
here.
that guy at my desk.
You do? Okay, yeah. So whenever I'm doing telehealth sessions, I actually use this one because not often a lot of people can hear the clicking. Yeah, the clicking and the moving. I like this one too because you hold it around your wrist. He's way over there, so I can't show you it right now, but I have a Stitch Poppet from Lilo and Stitch. So whenever I'm in in-person sessions, like my clients, who even if they're kids or adults, they just know at this point I'm usually popping it while I'm talking with them. And a lot of people say they feel at home because of that, which is really cool. But yeah, I think that these type of things are super underrated. They have such a bad rap. They help a lot of my kids and a lot of my adults even out through focusing, through social anxiety related areas, through maybe they're having a very emotional day in terms of the ADHD meltdowns, as we call it, where we're getting very overstimulated. So being able to just have something like this at your disposal, I think is super awesome. And it's very underrated into what it can do for people.
Agreed. One of the things that I love, and I've told a lot of my clients this too, and as I'm like playing with it, is like the pop socket things on the phone. It's like a constant like little thing to have going.
Oh, I love I need to get a new one actually.
They have the spinner ones. They have the ones that like do super pops. I love them.
So, fun fact, if you go on either the App Store or the Play Store, if you even just look up fidget toy apps, they literally have apps now where you can like literally just pop stuff on your phone. So if you have
Interesting.
nothing on you at all, you can just download one of these for free and you can get something until you can get
Nice.
like a real one.
That's really
Nice.
handy if you lose
Mhm.
yours or whatever. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the most important things that people with ADHD need to know about managing their symptoms, would you say?
I would probably say that first and foremost, I get into a lot of conversations about medication, but I will say if you are on medication, there is no shame in taking meds, right? There is no shame in that. I want to talk to my non-medicated people because there is a reality of ADHD people who don't respond well to medications for whatever reasons, whether that be the dyes they're made with, or they're allergic, or they just have really bad side effects when they take certain meds or what have you, right? There are options for these individuals too. It's probably going to be more behavioral therapy based related as opposed to medicinal. Although I will say that when it comes to medicinal therapy and pharmaceutical therapy, it is recommended that you be in therapy while taking, just because just the research has just shown that it's a big win over time. But if you are somebody that cannot tolerate medications for whatever reasoning, there is hope for you. There is hope, and that you are not somebody who is hopeless. You're not someone who's hopeless that can't really get a handle on their life and manage it to the best of your own individual ability, despite what some people in the community may tell you. And also on the flip side of that, you're also not a drug addict or a dope fiend. And these are things I've heard literally come out of my ADHDers' mouths, by the way. But you're not these things for taking medication either.
You mentioned an ADHD meltdown before. Have you ever had one of those? How does your ADHD affect your therapy?
Yeah, I usually get one of those probably at least once every few weeks. Right now, I'm building a business and I'm an entrepreneur. So it's definitely something that's new-ish. I've been doing that over the last year or so and just recently went full time with it too. So that's definitely been one of the biggest life adjustments over the last year. So I definitely think the meltdowns have increased more. I think that just being able to, ironically, being able to still struggle helps me connect with my clients more. I really like to use a more peer-to-peer approach. I think that peer-to-peer styles of therapy are a lot more beneficial than people really give them credit for. And I think there's a lot of stigma when it comes to peer as well as self-disclosure in therapy. I think my clients know right away that I have ADHD. A lot of my clients actually find me on TikTok, actually. So I take a lot of them there. So it's really funny. This kind of actually goes into a segue that I want to take like a few minutes to talk about anyway. But a lot of people, since they come through my TikTok and they come to get me, a lot of people are asking me, how does that work? Except usually for like dual relationships and ethics and things of that nature, right? And boundaries and whatnot. So I will say this. I have a few rules with that. Number one, a follower is not a friend. So that's definitely something I will say. I have a lot of boundaries when it comes to my social media. But at the same time, what I've noticed is that the people on TikTok, since they already have me, they see me in my office, they see me taking walks downtown. Occasionally I post, like maybe if I'm at dinner or something, just doing something with my friends, or I'll occasionally post it on there too. What I notice is they don't ask about that during session. They don't really talk about it really as much. So it actually doesn't become a distraction. The kids that don't have me on social media, and I don't go out of my way to tell them or anything like that if they didn't find me there, but they were, the kids and the adults even, they're the ones that ask me more about my personal life than the ones that found me on TikTok. So it's actually interesting because I feel like my life in that regard is more private, ironically, by being on social media. But yeah, I love using my TikTok actually as a resource too. People who, either don't work with me, not that TikTok's therapy, but having valuable information and tips for people at their disposal, I think is super beneficial for the community, especially through somebody who actually understands it.
And it's like new age marketing. This is the way now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, honestly, I think more therapists and more social workers need to get on board with using social media platforms to spread information. And honestly, I take a very person-centered approach. And so with that regard, I really meet my clients where they're at, and where our clients are at nowadays are on social media. We can't hide from it anymore. The other thing that I will say is that I don't think you have to show every aspect of your life like I do. And I don't even show every aspect really, but it feels like that sometimes. But I think it's one of those things where if you are If you're going to hide from this thing, you really are going to be behind on the times. I notice nowadays that like before, people were looking you up on social media to see what you were doing wrong. Nowadays, if you don't have anything on your social media, I notice people think you're suspicious. So it's interesting how that's
No, that's a good point.
That's
though.
true. Like you're a catfish or something. That's very true.
Yeah.
People want, it's a market. They want to know who their therapist is. They want to see their personality. Is this therapist going to be a good fit for me?
Yeah. And
type
I
of
think
thing.
when people are looking for a therapist, at least this is my experience, I want somebody who, you know, I can relate to a little bit. I want somebody who has just a good vibe, just a good energy about them.
Well, I think it's taken a lot of the guesswork out of things too, because the big thing before was being able to go to a therapist, see if you vibe with them, not really liking them, and then still paying them like $150 on top of that. And then at least now it's like with TikTok and other social media forums, like you can really see how your therapist acts, dress. Like I like the way you see me on here right now. Hats, right? Like this is how I dress for therapy. I wear t-shirts, I wear hats, I wear joggers or shorts. Occasionally I'll wear jeans. I don't dress up really like that for therapy. I want to actually be perceived as a peer. And as a result of that, I have filtered out people that I probably wouldn't vibe well with at the end of the day. At that same token, I have over 50 clients right now, right? I have this week 36 scheduled sessions for my practice, and I'm trying to hire someone to take some of that from me. But while I have all this extra stress, it's a good, fun stress because every single one of those people that work with me now, they are my perfect fit client. They are my perfect fit family. And it just really works between what they're looking for out of me versus what their personality is versus what my personality is that mixes. It works very well. And so I don't have a single person on my load where it's not that I can't stand working with anybody. You occasionally get someone that's assigned to you through CMH or something that's, oh God, I'm nervous to work with that person or whatever. I don't feel that at all, like at all. It's a perfect fit how I've set this up for myself.
So I know you've talked about it a little bit. Like you've talked about some of the challenges that you face having ADHD. How do you feel like you navigate those demands being a social worker, like especially being an entrepreneur, like or multitasking, time management? How do you maintain the focus having ADHD yourself in your role?
Oh geez. If you asked me this question 2 months ago, it would be a lot more organized. But I in the last 2 months I went full time with my business, so that got flipped on its head. But in general, what I do is so the big thing with me is I do client care, I do notes, and then I guess you could say I do marketing and outreach, both with my TikTok and then other community forums I use, and I throw events and other things like that too. So the priorities of what I do is I've set up my life for how I personally want. Mind you, this is through the entrepreneur ones. Like I've been able to carve my own path, thankfully. So now everyone's going to be able to do this. I am somebody first and foremost. I recognize that I do not vibe well in the morning. I'm just not a good morning person. I never have been. I am an extrovert, but I'm an extrovert at 11 to 9:30, 10, 11, 12 at night, right? So from 7 in the morning to 10, I don't want to interact with people. It doesn't matter how much sleep I get. So I don't schedule sessions during those times. I don't force myself to schedule sessions during those times. I use that for my morning time. I use that for going to the gym or making posts or editing videos that I previously filmed. What I do now, thankfully, is I live 5 minutes driving wise from my office now. I set that up strategically too. So now I mainly walk to work. So that takes about 20 minutes. So when I walk to work, I'm also responding to emails, or I'm making 1 or 2 TikTok videos a day now while I'm just walking to work, and I might edit one and release one, what have you. And then that kind of gets like my outreach work for the day. From there, I'm seeing people from like 11 to about 8:30 at night. And so what I will do is if I have client care tasks that I have to manage, or if there's letters I have to write, or some other weird thing that I'm doing, I have an Asana board that's actually keeping track of my whole office or my whole business. So if you don't know what Asana is, basically it's a free website. You can pay for it too, but I use the free version. And it just creates different boards, and it's online. It creates different little task bars, different projects, things like that. So I have projects called things like marketing, business development. I have 3 projects for I have for my current office, and then I have 2 for 2 future offices that I actually want to work on over the next year opening. So I have like little future projects in there too that I'm doing. I put tasks in there, and I have a few other projects. Essentially, I just manage everything through here. So if I have a letter that I have to write for somebody who maybe has an IEP meeting in 2 weeks or something, I just put their client number on that board under client care project. I just write 000, whatever their number is, needs this letter written, set the due date a couple days before it, and then you just crank it out during administrative time. As far as notes go nowadays, this is super ADHD friendly, and something I've discovered over the last month is I use this platform called Note Designer. So it's $15 a month. It writes your notes for you. So you literally just drag and drop like a couple different phrases. Takes like maybe 30 seconds to write your note, and then you just add in, just text wise, whatever else you want to add in. So usually what I do is I just have that write the bulk of the note, and then in therapy notes there's a section called additional notes and things like that. And if there's something specific I want to mention, like client mentioned this about their mom or what have you, I put that in there as well as supporting details. Takes me about 1 to 1.5 minutes a note as opposed to 5 to 10. So that is how I manage my practice in the most ADHD friendly way possible.
I'm gonna have to look at that note maker because like I'm using Simple Practice, which has significantly cut down on time, but that sounds even better. Like,
yeah, I've used Simple Practice for a little bit of time, so I think it's good with some of their notes options too. But yeah, it literally it breaks it down into a couple different sections. So if you play around with it, it'll take you like maybe 10 or 15 minutes to really figure out, as long as you're relatively tech savvy. And then they have a video tutorial that they have too, if you want that. But they have a bunch of different note guides. They have a basic note template, and then a soap note one, and then they have a bunch of different other ones. I mainly just use the basic note because all I have to do is click like 7 of them, especially because I'm niche down. So I'm pretty much talking about the same thing almost all day. Aside from a few little exceptions here and there that I usually just note in the additional section, but it's almost the same note minus a few people. So I'm just usually just going click, and then just throw it in there, and that's pretty much it, right?
yeah.
I love things like that make life easier, honestly. Technology has come so far.
That website has earned their $15 a month. I will gladly give them it.
That sounds like a reasonable price too.
Yeah.
It's very reasonable.
Is there any other advice that you would give to therapists who are also living with ADHD?
I would probably give them the advice of please live and be your most authentic selves, despite what the industry is going to try to make you do or make you become. Because if I did not live my most authentic self at this point in my life, I wouldn't be at where I'm at today. Like right now, I have a practice with, like I said, this week I have 36 people alone. I have about 50 people in my practice right now. We're getting ready to hire people. My practice, now that I've went full-time this month, I'm expected starting next month to start cracking anywhere between 8 to 10K a month for my business. I wouldn't have done this had I not just doubled down on my ADHD strengths and self, right? So a lot of people would have told me to just sit down and shut up and not go on social media, not do that. And full disclosure, I've gotten fired from a job that I strongly suspect was because of my social media. So I'm not saying go get fired from your jobs, but I am saying that ultimately them firing me, and I also want to point out, I tell the story not as an axe to grind or someone bitter, but because I think them firing me was the best thing for me, because if they didn't fire me, then I wouldn't have had the guts to quit without a plan impulsively with my ADHD, ironically, from the next job that was just beyond toxic. And to be honest, like I quit that job in 6 weeks after I got that. The one that fired me, I was at for a couple months, and then I got this really just job I knew wasn't going to work out. I said I'd be gone from there in 6 months, and I made it 6 weeks, and I just prayed something would happen. So I quit there and just prayed something would happen, and I just started really tripling down on my content online as well as my ADHD self. I got a viral video and I got 100 therapy inquiries in a weekend. So it just really worked out for me really well. And so what I do tell people is take my story with caution, be yourself. And it sounds so cliche, but I promise you, like, great rewards, even more than money, are going to come your way.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you literally just answered the next question I had for you perfectly, because I was going to ask you about your personal journey with having ADHD and like influencing your career path, and you just explained that so well. Is there other parts of that that you feel like, not just necessarily in your professional life, but as you, I don't know if you were diagnosed as a child or not, but do you feel like there was other aspects of your life that influenced that and making you decide, you know what, I think I'll take social work as my path?
Yeah. So to answer that first part, was I diagnosed as a child? So I was diagnosed with ADHD as a child. I went through the classic thing of family of, oh, it's probably not ADHD. We don't really want him to be on medication. We don't really need that, all the way up to ADHD is an excuse for parents to have poor parenting, for their kids to be brats. If you put my kid on drugs, they'll be a zombie and they will be a drug addict and all sorts of stuff. Basically, we got diagnosed at around 6 or 7. I actually remember being in school going through the classic things of like tests and press the space bar when you hear this sound type thing. And I got diagnosed with that, and it basically meant nothing, unfortunately. And I love my parents to death, but I'm pretty sure one, if not both of them, have ADHD and they're not really admitting it or even are aware of it. And I feel really bad just because of my parents, honestly, not for myself, but for them, because they can't, one in particular that I won't say, but they can't hear the word ADHD in front of them because it has that much stigma attached, as well as just, so it's just something, one of those things where I don't have anything to prove with my family at this point. But yeah, but I went through my whole childhood not believing I had ADHD, and then came to terms with it around 23 when my first therapist as an adult diagnosed me with ADHD. At that point, it just was more background information of, oh, I'm just distracted and I'm kooky and I'm funny because of that, whatever. It wasn't until about, I would say 2 or 3 years later, that when I was like 25 or 26 or so, that it really started encompassing more of my life, I noticed, and it was actually more intertwined than I thought. And that was around the time I actually had a conversation with a fellow colleague with ADHD as to how come they don't have ADHD specialty centers like they have with a lot of other things. Because you never see one. It's always integrated within like a family center or something, but it's never nobody who understands ADHD fully ever. So yeah, so I had that conversation with the colleague, and that's actually how I came up with my practice of being an ADHD niche center. And yeah, if we have time, we can get into more logistics of that, but I want to make sure I'm answering this one. So I don't know if that answered you guys or not, if I left anything out on that one.
I think you answered that really well. If you have more details on what you want, we definitely have time to go over it, on what you wanted to expand on.
Yeah, so right now how my practice is set up is it's literally just me. My wife helps runs it too. She runs the back end of things somewhat. She just graduated with her MSW as well. So we did not plan that, by the way. We both Yes, thank you. Thank you. I will tell her you all said congratulations on that. We did not plan that when we met, by the way. We actually met on Hinge during the pandemic.
I love that.
I love that.
Yeah, so I know so it's really funny. We got engaged actually like 11 and a half months later after we met. And I think at that point we did not totally plan this, but she wanted to be a social worker. And then on top of it, she also had ADHD, and I did not find that out until like maybe a month or two into dating. So that was not planned at all. But yeah, so that ended up happening. And I think at that point I was just like, that's my person. So it worked out really good. But yeah, so as far as my business goes, she helps run that. So it is going to be more of a family thing. But I do ultimately want to expand the practice into Indiana, into Ohio, and then also into the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which for those who are not familiar, that is the cutoff of Michigan where it's like the lake kind of separates it from the land, from what we call, I guess you can call it the mainland, I guess you could say. It's basically the part of Michigan that's connected to Wisconsin. That probably should be Wisconsin. So basically the reason we want to go up there, for context, I live in the Detroit area. That is about 4 to 8 hours away, depending on where you're at from Detroit. There are no resources in the UP. You will be lucky to find a provider that even takes Medicaid that's like a solo person out there. So we want to be able to provide a really great ADHD resources to these more rural communities over time. And so we ultimately want to open between Indianapolis, the Detroit area, as well as Ohio is going to be like year 5 in our business plan, but we want to open between 3 to 5 clinics in these areas total, not in each state, but total. And we want to have at least 100 therapists under us by the time that this is over that specialize within ADHD. And then we also want to make sure that we're offering a coaching element of it too, just because if you are not only taking Medicaid, also, we will be taking private insurance too. But if you are taking Medicaid, there's just always no money with Medicaid. And we want to make sure at the end of your limited license experience and things like that, as we hire you, we want to make sure it's worth it for you. So a lot of people who we'd be targeting, it would be the fully licensed people to take on the private pay individuals, which would be an easier gap to fill, actually, because that just pays more. But we really want to go after the limited license people over the next year or so, just because I always say this, unfortunately, with how the system is set up, you're going to be broke as it is your first 2 or 3 years, and we're going to try to pay you as well as we can compared to others. But the fact is Medicaid don't pay, and it sucks. But if you're going to help us expand our business, what we want to do is we want to set you up. So ultimately, what I want to do is 2 things. I want to have more neurodiverse informed therapists come into us. I don't care if that becomes your specialty at the end of this or not, but I want to make sure you are trained to work with these type of populations if you come across them. In the meantime, what we would do also is that if you work for us, we're not going to subject you to a no compete, which means by the time you leave us, whether if you come from the limited license journeys, that's like the LMSW level for most states. For Michigan, it's called the LLMSW, so depending on where you're at, but the limited level, that first track level, if you're going after that clinical license and you're someone that's like, I want to do a private practice, we want to make sure you're set up for life, which means you can take those people with you. We're not into hoarding people and taking people. We actually want to expand our business because, one, we actually want to disperse our business into smaller sub businesses over time. So that involves bringing you on, mentoring you, coaching you. Instead of having staff meetings over this is how you're going to write a note, we're going to treat you like a real professional, and we're going to show you how to market and outreach, right? So by the time you leave us, not only you'll have a full caseload for your private practice, that all you got to do now is worry about the logistics of setting up as opposed to marketing, but now you know how to market now to go into your next level. So we're going to set social workers up for life. My motto for my business side of my business, this is where the coaching side comes in a little bit too. So I do individual paid coaching, but essentially if you work for me, you get the coaching for free essentially, because you're essentially making me money and you're building my net worth and you're building my business net worth. So in turn, I'm going to ultimately build your net worth. My motto for this year is I want to make social workers rich. Is my big thing.
Yes,
So
I support that motto.
that is my 2 mottos. Provide neurodiverse affirming care to more people and make social workers rich.
I love that you're like offering the ability to like coach and help people set up to succeed, because you do see it so much in the mental health field. There's this gatekeeping on like, no, these clients have to stay here. And then you set them up with somebody like that they're not going to maybe work well with because there's that competition issue.
Right.
I do like that setup. That is good
So
for you, good for clients, good for everybody all around.
Absolutely. And just from a business perspective of things, I'm somebody who I really don't believe in competition. And unfortunately, a lot of the community mental health aspects around here, along with the gatekeeping, they've done this for so long because they recognize that their behaviors are questionable, to say the least. The reason I don't believe in competition, I believe in collaboration, is because, one, I hate to say it like this, but I do give myself credit where credit is due. I know I'm the shit. I know I'm a good provider. I know I work with the people who work well with me very well. And of turn, when I make my organization and start hiring people, I'm going to then make my clinicians so popular and so great that they know that as well, and they actually feel that. A lot of times in our field, we're taught to be super humble about our job and feel so small. I think you need to know that you're really a badass at what you do, and that's totally fine. So for me, I want to set social workers up for success. And by success, I want you to be able to just know who you are, know your niche, know your specialty, and really just go at it this year, right? I don't know. I just feel for me, I also know what's going to come back to me, because in turn, what's going to happen is as I hire people and let people go, let's say I get somebody who, I don't know, they started off here working with ADHD people, but then they worked with the people who also have bipolar disorder as a co-occurring disorder. And then they realized they really like working with bipolar disorder people. Well, what's going to happen is they're going to want to stay here while they get their limited license, but they're learning how to market. So now they're picking their own caseloads. So they're marketing, bringing these people in, but now they also get to keep them when they leave. So that's more of an incentive to bring them in. Then they're going to go. And then let's say a year or two after they go, they're probably still going to stay in contact with us because we believe in collaboration. We're going to refer to them. They're also going to refer to us, which is going to bring us both back money. I'm just over community mental health, and I'm also over big tech at this point. So that's my business motto, is I really don't want to be, I want to grow my business and expand it, but I don't want to be a 50 state tens of thousands of therapists under me. I want to be super intimate, and then I want to build it up, and then I want to break it down, and then I want to build it up and then disperse it and break it down, because I think smaller agencies and smaller practices, you get the better results in them when it comes to mental health care, as
You
opposed
want
to
your
big.
therapists to be people with their clients and not, let's get you in, out 15 minutes. This is it. We're done. We're just moving numbers.
I can't, the place I told you about where I quit in 6 weeks, they had it to where they would literally, you would get so you were already overbooked with clients as it was. I think this one girl I had, because of the turnover rates they had and everything, she had about 600 people on her caseload. And so I started, which is not realistic at all, just so anybody's clear, that they were not being served at all. I was helping her with audits, and basically there were clients on her caseload that hadn't been seen in months. I found clients on the caseload that were assigned to her without her even knowing, because another therapist quit and then they didn't tell her, so they just threw it on her, but they didn't tell her, that had schizophrenia and active suicidal ideation that weren't seen since November after their intake. And I had to call on that one when I found that one. And that's, I think, the moment where I was like, yeah, I'm done. Like, I'm not even doing 6 weeks. I'm not even doing 6 weeks here. Like, yeah, I'm just over the mental health, the community mental health agencies. I'm over their crap. I think they've exploited a lot of our clients enough at this point. And I think that, I'm hoping that I can at least make a very small dent in this issue that's in this country.
Yeah.
I was actually just going to ask you, Justin, what are your hopes for the future of ADHD research and treatment in this country?
I would like to see ADHD be diagnosed around between birth and the age of 2 at some point, because there's research being done currently that's suggesting you can do that. So for context, you can't be diagnosed with ADHD until the age of 6. So right now with the ADHD diagnosis, they're also considering putting ADHD under the autism umbrella. I have mixed feelings on that personally. I feel like there's going to be a lot of issues with doing that, just because we tend not to explain diagnoses. We just make them and then go about it. But whatever they name ADHD in the future, right? Because I'm sure there will be a name change. I think they've had at least 10 or 12 name changes by now from what I've researched. But whatever they name it at some point, I would like it to eventually be able to either we see certain things in your birth and the day you're born that we can see, or we could do brain scans, or maybe by the age of 2 we see certain behaviors, so that way you can have an upper leg treatment. Because what's happening is nowadays a lot of kids though are getting diagnosed earlier, which is great, but what happens with a lot of other kids is they don't get diagnosed until about 12, 14, 16, when they go into middle school and high school, and they have that adjustment period of not having the same teacher that knows them inside and out all day, every single day, right? They have different teachers they go to. They have different transitions they have, right? The routine isn't exactly the same anymore. And they realize these kids are having a harder time, right? There's a lot of other people right now who are adults still who are coming into their ADHD diagnosis, and they're not discovering their ADHD diagnosis until college or even after college, because maybe academically your ADHD works well because of certain systems you've already put in place since the age of 5 or 6, which is great because that means your parents did their job, and maybe they didn't look at you as the quote ADHD child, but they looked at you as these are the challenges my child has, and we're going to put systems in place. That's great, except because now we don't have the label to put on it. Now you're out in the work world with a completely different situation, and now you're struggling out here because it's not exactly like school. So those systems don't work anymore. So you don't know, you have to create a new system now. You don't even know what to expect with the work world, let alone the new system, right? So that's how a lot of adults now are discovering they have ADHD, is because they get into the work world, especially after college, and they have no idea what's going on. They have no idea how to keep track of anything they do.
Yeah. That's a great point. We covered a lot of great information today. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll even do a follow-up in the future, because there's just so much on this topic that I love personally. But yeah, thank you again. I would, if you don't mind, if you can get us the links for that TED Talk and the YouTube and the Amazon sensory thing, because I would love to put that in the description for this for anybody that's listening, because, well, me too. I also want to look at them.
She
But,
just really wants the link,
I think
right?
everybody just wants the box. Yeah, everybody just wants the box. Yeah, this thing is like my absolute favorite thing. This one I have in the box, but it wasn't in the box before. This is one I got through a mental health fair, though. It was actually the bank. So a big thing nowadays that a lot of businesses are doing is they're really getting on board the sensory trains now, which I'm not going to say ADHD gets the gatekeep this, but we are the ones that kind of started this. So I am just going to point out that everybody just took our stuff and just decided they was trendy and cute. So now we're going to give it away as goods, which is fine by me because I got 20 things of this like this for free. So it works out for my practice. But so every other thing in here is like things I bought. And then every other thing in my office that I have, it has like random like business logos. And they're like, where's this one from? But it was free. And I was like, whatever. So that's like my favorite thing to do now is see what do they have for free out there. And you can make like a whole box like this at this point.
Love it. Love it. All right. I think that I know that I have work early in the morning. I'm sure everybody else probably has stuff going on in the morning as well. I apologize for my cat again.
It's okay.
But thank
I'm
you.
part of the show.
Yeah, he just wants to be on.
Attention. Act like she never gets it. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.
Bye. Nice meeting you.
Meeting you too.
Before we depart for the day, we want to remind you that if you have topics you would like to hear about or just have general comments, feel free to reach out and submit those.
Or if you have a topic you want to discuss with us here, reach out. We're always welcoming of making new connections.
Our site is linked below, but please check out our TikTok, our Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube. Talk to you later, everyone, and thanks for listening.
And remember, take care of the future.
Take care of each other.
Take care of yourself.